everybody. Today on the channel I'm conducting a little bit of a science experiment. I want to find out exactly how much rage it is possible to generate in the comment section of one YouTube video. And I am doing that by setting an Italian cat amongst some German pigeons, because in this video I'm going to be giving you 5 reasons why I think that a Ferrari is just better than a Porsche. Before we get started proper, allow me to lay my cards on the table, particularly for those who don't know the channel. I actually love both Porsche and Ferrari, and I am presently an owner of models from each of the marques. Though today's video is of course very much one-sided, in the near future I will do one to redress the balance, but I thought it'd be fun to start with this and discuss a few things that some people often don't talk about, or maybe are just a little bit underappreciated. Those who do watch the channel will know that I am actually a great believer that no one car brand is really better than any other, and I actually think the world would be a much better place if we all, as simply car people, could just learn to get along a little bit more. In any case, I invite all of you at any point during this to hop into the comment section and enjoy the inevitable fallout from a few people that no doubt have a bit of a sense of humour failure. In fact, I've got £5 that already says somebody has complained about the fact I say Porsche and not Porsche. It's a British thing. You'll get over it. Unless you're that guy that's just commented. Anyway, we begin with the badge. No, not because they've both got a horsey on, and really I should do a story about that at some point, but the fact that I think today the Ferrari badge still means something. It's still special. Of course, over the last 3 decades, all of the premium brands, by which I mean not just the likes of Ferrari, Porsche and Lamborghini, but also Mercedes and BMW, have grown immeasurably. Back in the 1980s, even a 3 Series was a relatively uncommon sight here in Britain. A 911 has of course always been a more common car than a Ferrari, but as soon as we got the likes of the Boxster, and more importantly the Cayenne and later the Macan, a Porsche in of itself just wasn't a rare thing anymore. And yes, I know somebody has almost certainly already hopped into the comment section to say, yeah, but a GT3 RS is still a really rare car, much rarer than that Ferrari you're driving, which incidentally, by the way, is a 296 GTB. I was going to do this video in my F12 Berlinetta, which I think is long overdue a little bit of screen time. However, as Confucius once said, when Ferrari's press department lend you a brand new 830 horsepower car, you drive it as much as you can. And I figured it would be a nice, interesting background for today's topic. Incidentally, please do let me know if you prefer these discussions on the move, as this one is, or sat in the garage, in the study, in a more static and slightly calmer environment. If you want to know a little bit more about this particular car, by the way, I have already filmed a couple of reviews on it, one about the drive and also one about what the car is like to live with, and those may have come out before this anyway, so please enjoy those afterwards. I'll try and remember to put links in the description down below. Like I also mentioned, Ferrari itself has also grown considerably in the last 30 years, but not by anywhere near the same extent as Porsche. To give you some sort of context, back in the 1990s, which for me, maybe because I was young then, was the heyday of Ferraris when they were still a really rare sight, they made something like 11,000 355s, which was their sort of volume model, over a space of about 5 years. Today, they'll make about 15,000 cars every year. They're quite good. Oh, 830 horsepower, this. Crumbs. Anyhow, so a Ferrari is still a more common thing than it used to be. They also have quite a few more models. So back in, say, 1995, your choice was 355, 550, 456, and then a couple of years later that was joined by the F50, but that was always a limited run thing. These days you still just about have a front engine V12, the recently retired 812, which now has been followed up by the special version, the 812 Competizione. Then you have the mid-engine car, which today is this, the 296, which comes in both GTB and Spider GTS form. You have the Roma, now available as both a coupe and also a Spider. You've also now got the Puro Sangue, the big FUV, as they call it, and the other special models too, like the Monza SP1, SP2 and the Daytona SP3. In fact, at one point in the recent past, Ferrari had more models than the rest of the Fiat group. I don't think that's true today, but it was for a little bit. This, I think, has helped and gone some considerable way to making them still feel individually like fairly rare things. And one of the issues with, say, a 911 GT3 is that to most people, it's a 911. Whereas this doesn't really look like anything else, save for a 296 GTS. And that's important. It means a lot. These things attract attention like I think no 911 could ever even possibly dream of doing. Really, the only sort of Porsche in recent memory that I think could truly draw a crowd like this would have to be either a Carrera GT or a 918. Maybe it's the Spider-Man tribute spec that this car is wearing, but honestly, in the few days that I've had it, I've never known a car get even close to the number of looks, smiles, waves, and general comments that this does. People go mad for it. And I've got to say, that for me is a really important part of the package. When you're looking at a supercar, not just a sports car, I appreciate there'll always be people out there who want a more understated thing, and for them, you know, a 911, great. Because you can drive a GT3 Touring. There's someone around here who has a grey GT3 Touring, and I'm sure they bought it knowing that very, very few people out there will realise what exactly it is. Second, and this is possibly going to be the most controversial bit of all, engines. Porsche have made some crackers. The aforementioned GT3's engine is a masterpiece, as is the old Metzger Flat 6. But let's be honest here, how many great Porsche engines do you immediately think of when I say that haven't gone in the back of a 911?
All right, you can have that one.
The Cayenne is in fact infamous for having engines that are unreliable. The Panamera, it's the same, they're functional, some of them are very, very fast, but memorable? No, not really. The 968 and 944's four-cylinder was a very, very nice, interesting thing, but an all-time great? Not even close. However, when it comes to Ferrari, well, take your pick of the 355's V8, the greatest sounding car of all time. The F430's unit, which is not quite as great, maybe the 458's on a technical basis is superior, a 9,000 RPM masterpiece. I know I don't actually generally like that car, but the engine is superb. The 488 and Roma's 3.9 litre twin turbo, easily for me the best forced induction engine out there, full stop. Matched maybe only by the 5.5 litre Mercedes AMG lump, which is a very, very different character. What we've then got in the back here continues the tradition. It's a 120-degree twin-turbo V6 that has hybrid assistance, but even without that, makes the same power as the old Enzo, 660 horses. It even makes a fairly good noise, and in the day and age of particulate filters and ever stricter regs, that's becoming increasingly difficult. But Ferrari really appreciate the importance of noise. They also appreciate the importance of making an engine bay look good. When's the last time you saw a 911's engine? You have to go back quite a few years. In fact, today, I don't think you can even try and see it. There's just no access. Bit of a shame, really, considering how brilliant the engine is. This one, okay, it's getting a little bit technical, there's a lot of stuff in the way, but go back to say like the F8, which was available only a couple of years ago, and it's a stunner, to say nothing of the 12 cylinders. And Porsche just does not have an answer for those. The 812, the F12, the 550, heck, the old 330. I've driven Ferrari V12s across about 5 decades, and they are all incredible. Towering achievements, easily the best engines of whenever it was that they came out. They're stunning. I'm sure, again, you could make an argument that in certain cases they just aren't as good as they should be. They drink a lot of fuel no matter how modern they are and how efficient they should be. They're just thirsty, thirsty devils, and you could argue the torque figures for the old ones aren't that great, the power figures maybe aren't that great, and perhaps on occasion the numbers quoted were maybe a little bit optimistic, but you know what? I don't care. A 355's engine might be bested by that of a 993 turbo, but it's magic, it's glorious, it is a little opera in the back of your car. It's wonderful. Next up, the styling. I've kind of touched on it a little bit already, but let's face it, the Italians do know how to make something look good. As we're sat in it, let's take the 296 as an example, because it's the latest car from the firm. And I've got to say, though even I am a little bit on the fence, I think there are some angles where it works, some where it doesn't. You've got to give them credit for having a bit of bravery and taking the styling language that had been evolving from the 458 up to the F8 and essentially binning it. And what they've introduced is an absolutely glorious tribute to 1960s curvaceousness. This is a very feminine looking car, has shades of Ford GT40 or Ferrari 250 LM if you prefer about it. There's little nods too to the likes of the 308, and I like the fact that Ferrari is very, very good at having little touches that call back to some of their old cars without just basically recycling the same design over and over for 50 years like Lamborghini did. They had the Countach, it was great, but then they kind of needed to move the game on. And look, I think an Aventador is still a stunning car, but their styling language, it's been a bit safe, hasn't it? Same really for the current 911, the 992. I think it's far too desperately retro for its own good. The fact is, the 911's shape is inherently retro. There's nothing else like it out there. You know it's a 911 just from the side profile, so you don't need to keep adding all these sort of old school looking things to it. It's just not right. This is very proudly modern, yet at the same time has elements from the past too. It's a glorious thing, and it's the kind of car that I would love to take to a car show, so I have an excuse just to sit next to it with my Pepsi Max in hand, stare at it and go, yeah, look at that, and oh, you know, I've just noticed this. The other side of this styling argument too is the interiors, and here I think, again, Porsche simply don't have an answer. Now, part of it is going to be the customers that you get for Porsches. They are far more likely to specify just a regular black plain interior than anybody else would with a Ferrari, but still, the styling, the theatre, the sense of occasion you get when you just open the door of a Ferrari. Sure, I'll grant you, the Porsche is generally better from a technological standpoint and likely from a build quality one too. They are a more mass market car and they feel so in all the ways, both good and bad. But as we're talking about supercars here, as we're talking about special occasion event cars, these are magic. And again, look, there's plenty of stuff that I don't like. The obsession that the firm currently has with all these capacitive buttons is just daft, and I really hope that, like with VW, eventually they see sense and they go back a step, because that really would be just a big improvement. However, I do think it's a nice place to be. It's got loads of nice materials. In the case of this one, lots of leather and carbon fibre, and the view out is sensational, though I will again give many a 911 a credit for having a nice one of those. But you're never, ever, 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 ever in any doubt you're in something anything less than truly special. Next up, and we may as well have another controversial one because I can sense the comment section slowly starting to simmer. I want to bring it back up to the boil, and that's the community. Again, from a couple of different perspectives. First off, by sheer function of Porsches simply being a far more common car, there's a good chance that if you walk up to somebody randomly that just happens to be driving a Porsche, they might not be a car person. There's a good chance they've just bought it because, you know, they've got a little bit of money, and that's what you do, isn't it? When you've got some money, you buy a Porsche. Particularly those, I think you have a Cayenne or a Macan or something like that, or even your Boxsters, and of course the odd 911 GT3. Please don't even get me started on the whole investment thing. Actually, do get me started. I'll get on it in a little bit. And while a Ferrari is certainly not immune to that, I would say if you want a brand that is, you've got to go with either McLaren or Lotus. They're certainly a lot better for having owners that are more into the car, particularly if you're looking at an old one, and I think really it's true for Porsche too. This is more likely to be somebody that's always obsessed about that particular car. They haven't gone and bought it just because it's a Ferrari. And realistically, if you look at anything older really than a sort of 488, so anything 430, 458, you know, 575, 599, this is probably a car enthusiast. But the thing that actually gets me the most is when you go to a car meet. And I've been to lots of both Porsche and Ferrari. I'll be honest, and I know a lot of people will feel this way, when I was thinking about buying my first Ferrari, one of the things that I was really concerned about was the image of the Ferrari owner. Not just what people would think of me, but also what I'd think of them. I'm sure we've all heard the stories of, well, this guy had a Ferrari and I went to talk to him, but actually he turned out to be a total tosser that thought I wasn't worth his time, and I'm sure that happens. But when I go to Ferrari meets, people are generally pretty decent. Yeah, sure, there's plenty of millionaires or people just desperate to show off their Forex or Bitcoin winnings, but you know, also there's a lot of just really nice, decent, ordinary people that have done well in life, and they've treated themselves by buying a Ferrari. They use it as much as they can, they love it, they enjoy it, it's their thing. They don't live in a £1 million house, they don't live in a fancy part of London, they're just decent people that have worked hard, maybe got a little bit lucky, and this is how they're treating themselves. Sometimes they'll decide that they'd rather have the car than an annual holiday to Dubai. Different strokes for different folks. The one thing that I have certainly never ever had when I've gone to any Ferrari meet is people criticizing the car I've turned up in. I am fairly confident that you could arrive in the scabbiest 308 GT4, Mondial, or any of the other generally unloved Ferraris, and you would still be welcomed with open arms by your fellow Ferrari owners as a Ferrari owner. But the number of Porsche meets I went to, back in the early days when I didn't have one but my mum had a 993 and a 996, the difference in reception you'd get if you turned up in the 996 versus the 3 was incredible. Some of it, of course, was in jest. Oh, so you brought the kettle, all that stuff. But you know, it gets tiring. You know, that's a special thing. People work ruddy hard to get a 911 as well. And it doesn't matter if what you've bought is a scabby 5 grand Boxster that needs a little bit of help. If that's what you've worked hard for, and if that's what you've got, people should respect that. You've decided to turn up to a club or marque meet, and you want to share the passion for the brand. The last thing you want is for somebody to tell you, well, you know, it's not good enough, is it? It's not as fast as mine. It's not as expensive as mine. I'm considerably richer than you. People expect that from the Ferrari crowds, but I've never actually had it. The Porsche crowd, though, get it all the time. I remember I went to a local meet organised by a good friend of mine, and there was some really, really nice stuff turn up. But there was also a guy who turned up in a 99, whatever it was, GT2 RS, the last one of those that they made. And he seemed nice. He owned it with his son, and he'd been using it, and at this point in time, you could flip those cars and make a lot of money, but he wasn't. He was using it. Then he had to tell me, he just had to tell me that it was the fastest car here. He had to make sure that I knew it was the biggest, it was the best, he was the baddest wolf at the show. The fact was that over there, was a real Lamborghini Miura S, and over there was a genuine GT40. He really picked the wrong meat to try and impress anybody at, and yet still he had to try. And I tire of that. Like I said at the beginning, actually what really matters to me is that all us car people get along and we share a little bit of love for all brands, all marques, all models at all price points. Because if you're displaying enthusiasm, even if you don't have a car, you know what, you're all right in my books. I really don't care. Life has been good to me. I've been able to buy some nice toys. I'm really big on sharing them with other people because, you know, by doing that, I've managed to get the toys. But it doesn't matter what you've got, at what stage in life you are. If you're a 20-year-old and you've just about scraped together and you've got £1,000 worth of MR2, congratulations to you. It may be the same as this in your mind, and that's fantastic because you've got enthusiasm. You are a better person than somebody that's got a £250,000 911 and is only interested in it so long as it's the quickest thing around the Nürburgring. Finally, and this is what's really actually to me changed a lot in the last 10 years. It used to be, and granted this was before I could actually afford any of these things, that in my head the Ferrari would be the car that you'd lust after, but the Porsche would actually be the one that you would buy. Because everybody knew if you bought a Ferrari, it was going to depreciate a lot. It was going to cost you a lot of money. As soon as it got out of the warranty period, it was going to break, and then nobody would want it, and that's why it had depreciated. A Porsche, meanwhile, you could buy, you could enjoy, you didn't have to play silly games with your dealer to get one, and you could put miles on it, use it, it'd be dependable, and it would be an actually usable car. You'd think about a 360, but you'd buy a 911 Turbo. Now though, the world has gone all sorts of strange. 15 years ago, dealers were basically discounting the GT3 RS because they couldn't shift them. Now you have to basically commit an unspeakable act to even get consideration for going on the list that dealers might possibly maybe use to think about giving a car to before actually just giving it to someone that's going to go and flip it 2 months later for a massive profit, claiming that honestly they had no idea that that was what was going to happen. Ferrari have always been a little bit more transparent. In fact, when it comes to the really special stuff, you know, La Ferrari and all that sort of thing, they actually have in the press release, here's who you essentially need to be, here's what you need to have to be considered for one of these cars. They're very clear about it, they're very open about it. And as for this sort of stuff, you want to buy one of these, do you know what you need to do? You need to walk into your dealer and tell him you want one. 911 GT3? Not going to happen. You turned up and you said you even want a Boxster Spider or a GT4. You're basically laughed out the showroom. And if you do actually have to have one, well, it'll be second hand and you might have to pay significant overs for it. And this to me is just, it's just madness. Who's going to pay £400,000 or £500,000 for a GT3 RS? I'll tell you who, it's somebody that thinks someone else is going to pay £600,000 or £700,000. It's not somebody that wants to buy it and drive it. And sure, occasionally the dealer will get the car to the right person. Case in point, Roger Bailey, lovely chap, also has a YouTube channel and miraculously has a dealer that will actually give him the decent cars that I know he uses and enjoys. But there are also so many cars out there just being flipped for profit. No, again, Ferrari is not immune to this, but when it comes to the majority of their cars, the only difference really is whether you get one now or in a couple of years. If you want one of these, the order book is still open. The price is the price, you don't have to pay any more, and unfortunately, yes, the price is a lot. And that brings us on to the final point, which is that I think Ferraris today actually offer relatively good value. And I know. That sounds daft, doesn't it? That's crazy talk. How could that be? And this is where I'm afraid 296, you're not helping me here, because the car I am driving today has a list price of £250,000, but this one is actually £360,000. It's worth more than the vast majority of houses I've lived in. Balmy. absolutely balmy. And of course, if you're trying to make an excuse for it in terms of price per performance, it's just not going to happen, because Ferrari don't really indulge in the whole Nürburgring thing, and for as long as Porsche do, that's going to be the metric that they'll use to explain why their cars are better, because they are faster, and there is no other way you could judge a car. Well, I think there are lots of ways, but anyway, we're talking about price. This is point number 5, by the way, and the final one. A few years ago, things were different. Ferraris were cheaper, so were Porsches. You could get a 996 GT3 for 35 grand, 997 GT3, 50 to 60 grand. Even older, special stuff, Carrera GTs weren't the obscene money that they are now. Sure, some of the things like the 2.7 RS, they'd gone up quite a bit, but you could get yourself a 964 RS or a 993 GT for not daft money. Today, though, my 550, that's worth, let's call it, 70, 75 grand, if I'm lucky. That would just about get you into a plain 993 coupe manual. Great car, really, genuinely brilliant car, but it's the entry-level model. It's a far more common car than a 550, has a far less special engine. The Ferrari's V12 is just better, sorry, it is. The interior is far more special as well. The 993s was beginning to get a little bit iffy and out of date. Even Porsche would tell you that. But they command the same, because the market's got to the point now where apparently this is how it is. Let's take the F12, and let's just call that, for the sake of argument, a 150 grand car. Well, that would just about get you a 993 turbo, which is lovely and nice and everything, but it's basically like the 993 but quicker. I really like the 993 turbo. If there were 80 grand or so, I'd probably consider having one, but they're not. If we're looking at, say, more modern machinery, well, 150 grand will get you into a lot of GT3s. I suppose that's really not equivalent to the F12, but in terms of pricing in a modern car, you'd get maybe a manual 991.2, which is a very different flavour, more equivalent to, say, the Scuderia. And again, okay, the Ferrari equivalent, 458 Speciale, they're a lot more money, over £300,000. But for the price of a decent, nice, solid, older 911, an air-cooled one, you're talking 60 to 100 grand before you get to the interesting stuff, the turbos and the RSs and all that, and some of those are crazy money themselves. You could get a lot of Ferrari. A 355, easily done for under 100 grand. 360, you can get a nice one of those for like 60 grand. F430, again, 80 grand, give or take. Okay, 458, quite a bit more money, but then a 488, that's a 150 to 180 grand car, and compared with a 991, ooh, yeah, a bit tricky that really. It isn't just Porsche prices that have gone up in the last few years, of course, and in some ways you could say what's happened to those is mild compared to what's gone on in the Japanese car scene, with the likes of Skylines, particularly the later R34 GTRs and your Supras and the like, even an NSX now commanding silly money. I mean, there's a great example, the NSX. The whole point of it was that it was kind of like a Ferrari, only it worked more of the time and it was cheaper. But now, it's kind of like a Ferrari, only more expensive. The Fast and the Furious made a point of how funny it was that a Ferrari costs a lot more money than a Supra, yet it gets smoked by one. Today, though, more than you can afford, pal, Supra. A lot of the people I know that were big into their Japanese cars, and still are coming over to Ferrari because the brand has more stuff that's affordable. And yes, again, I know what you're thinking, yeah, but James, buying a Ferrari is just one part of it. They're also really, really expensive to run, a lot more so than a Porsche or a Japanese car. Well, anecdotally, I would say that's not really true. Yes, sure, I've had some big bills with the likes of the 550, but I've also known plenty of people with 993s, particularly turbos, and certainly the old Japanese stuff that have also had really, really colossal bills too. These are old performance cars, and the fact is, none of them are going to be that cheap to run. A Skyline, especially modified, can be a lot of cash to keep going, and the fact is, even if it hasn't broken, generally you'll find a way to spend some more money on it anyway. Even more recent 911s I've known occasionally, you've got to have an engine rebuilt. I mean, I've spent as much in the last couple of years maintaining the 2.7 litre, £4,000 Boxster that my girlfriend's family bought for her than I have my 430 Scuderia. That's a bit of context for you. I'll do a video on exactly how it got to that stage, but yeah. And to be honest, yes, sure, particularly if you're talking about more modern stuff, the water-cooled 911s, like for like, they are going to be cheaper to run than a Ferrari. But don't pretend that they're incapable of chucking a big bill your way, because that simply isn't true. And so, there are 5, I think, loosely connected and hopefully semi-believable reasons as to why I think a Ferrari is actually a better, more enjoyable thing to own than a Porsche. I love them both, I will always love them both, and if you've made it to the end of this video, I want to say a big thanks to you, particularly if you haven't got in for me in the comments section, but even if you have, well, you know what? All is fair in love in the YouTube comments section. So, I want to say a big thanks to you all for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.